Hi, this is just a summary of Calc class for today, Friday, September 20th. Today what you did in class was your bell work was to make sure again that you had your book covered and your syllabus signed. And then really what we did is we just went over some problems that asked you to use your calculator like the one on the screen and make some models. So we're just going to go through problem 13 and that really summarizes all the problems that you went over in class. Additionally, you got your quizzes back, or you looked at your quizzes again, and Mr. Bauer talked about or did some remediation in class to get you ready for a retake, and the retake is going to happen on Tuesday during resource. And you again need to get at least a 17 or above to not have to retake it again. His resources are in room 290, and you again get 12 minutes to take the 5-question no calculator quiz. So let's look at problem 13. Problem 13 talks about health maintenance organizations, and it shows you the bar graph shows the number of people in millions receiving care for HMOs, again, health maintenance organizations, for the years 1990 to 2002. So it says, let t be the time in years, with t starting at 0, corresponding to 1990, and use the linear regression capabilities of the graphing calculator to find a linear and cubic model for the data. So turn your calculator on. Since we're dealing with data, you'll hit Stat, you'll hit Edit, and then you're going to enter your data into List 1. Always just go up to the top and hit Clear and Enter, and it clears out your data for those lists. So clear, enter, there we go. So in list 1, I'm going to put times or years. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then in list 2, I'm going to put, as it says, these are the number of people in millions. I'm going to put the people in millions. So let's enter that next. So the first one for your 0 or 1990 would be 33. You don't have to put the point 0 because even if I do, notice it just goes back to 33. Okay, we now have all of the people in millions entered into list 2, and it says first find the linear model. Again, the reason or the way that you do that is you hit Stat, you will hit Calculate, linear model for algebraic purposes is number 4. You hit Enter. Now if you have a new model, it gives you a list of, it will tell you or ask you the questions kind of where to put list or the X list, so you just list 1, where to put the Y list, list 2, and then it will ask you where do you want to store this, and then you'll hit vars, Y vars, functions, Y1. You can put it in Y2, Y3, but we can do the same thing on a classic view, and then you'll hit Calculate or Enter, and you'll see all this information pop up. Now, what we want to make sure that we see, and you don't see it on this calculator at the moment, is we want to make sure that we can measure how well does our data fit. So what you need to do quick is you need to hit Second Catalog, and you need to arrow down all the way to the D's, or you can hit Alpha D. And if I did it right, Alpha D, you're going to look for something that's called diagnostic on, because some of us have, oops, I went too far. Some of us have R values and R squared on our calculator. So you're just going to hit Enter here, make sure it says done. Now if I run that again, hit Stat, Calculate, Linear Regression, oops, I didn't hit linear, let me clear this out. Stat, calculate, linear regression, vars, y vars, number 1, y1. Now when I run this, it gives me an r and an r squared value. R and r squared really tell you how well does the linear line fit. So let's look at it. Let's go to first, second, y equals. Let's turn on our data. So turn this on. We want it to be points. And then we're going to hit zoom number 9. Zoom number 9 is zoom stat. You should be familiar with that. Oop, I went too far again. And you see this linear line that goes right through the middle of your data. And that's just the linear model. So when they ask you in part A, find a linear model, it's all typed up in here, but what you want to write down for calc purposes is you want to write down just the equation to 3 decimals. Okay, so I'm going to go one more time through that. Calc number 4, and there it is. Okay, so I'm just going to put this screen up for a moment and look back at my calculator. I don't think I can actually type on here and write at the same time. So your equation is a y equals ax plus b, and here's what you substitute in for a, and here's what you substitute in for b. So this is how you would write your answer. Again, 3 decimal places is what's required on the AP exam. Okay, so then the next question that was asked of you, in part A was find the cubic model for your data. So if you're going to do the cubic model, you do the same thing, stat, calculate, cubic is number 5. Cubic. Make sure you clear this out. So stat, calculate, cubic is number 6. If you want your linear or your model, again, you're going to hit vars, y-vars, function, and since we already have our linear model up here in y1, let's put our cubic model in y2, just so we can see that happen. So notice it jumped right in there right away. You have all the variables again for your cubic model. And now if we hit our graph feature, or if you look down here already, we see that our cubic model follows that a little bit better. So let's hit graph. That one's our linear model, and this is our cubic model. So for part A, you're just going to write down both of those 2 equations, or models, and again round to 3 decimal places. And that's really the same thing for part B. Use the graphing utility to graph the data, and we've done that. Okay, part C says determine which model, looking at our graph, which one do you think fits better? Well, hopefully you agree with me that the cubic model just fits a little bit better because the data follows it as you look at it. You can also look at those r squared values and see which one has a little bit higher. But again, looking at the data, we can clearly see that the cubic one fits. Okay, now it says use the linear and the cubic models to estimate the number of people receiving care in HMOs in the year 2004. We knew from our graph that this went all the way up from 1990 up to 2002. So 2004 would be if we had 14. Now, there's multiple ways that you could do this. One way would be to go to second trace, and you could hit number 1 and hit a value. And so we would want to type in 14, and you hit enter, and it says invalid. The reason that it says invalid is, remember, how big is our data? Well, it only goes out to 12. So you can't just type that in unless your window is large enough. So if we go to window, notice that our window doesn't even go up to 14. Let's make our window go up to 20. Now if you hit graph, your graph was shifted over slightly. And now after you've traced it, if you go to second trace and hit value now, you should be able to type in 14 and find out that for your first linear model, how many people were in 2004? 96.1 or 0.2 million people. Okay, so we found again that in 2004, there will be 96.184 million people enrolled in HMOs. Now, if you want to do the same thing for Y2, notice it just changed a little bit, and all I did was hit the arrow down. If you hit trace again and type in 14, go back to your graph, trace. So you notice how it says P1 at the top. If I arrow down, that's Y1. If I arrow down, that's Y2. So hit second trace, value, you type in 14. Again, it's always going to go back to the y1 because that's your first one in here, which is why our second method for doing this and looking at the table is great. So if you do second table, you could start to arrow down if you wanted to and get to 14, or you could type it in. So notice, for our linear model in 2004, there's 96.184 million people enrolled in HMOs, and in our cubic model, there's only 51.833 million people enrolled in HMOs. So that would be answering question letter E. Now it just says, using your graphing utility, find other models for the data. Which model do you think fits best? The only other model that we really address is the quadratic model. So you would go to Stat, you can go to Calculate. Quadratic, I've hit it accidentally a few times, is number 5. And notice how I have a 14 there. It's going to give me an error. You have to make sure it's completely clear before you do this. So Stat, Calculate, number 5, vars, yvars, function, and I'm going to put this in y3 since my other two, these two are already filled. So I'm going to hit y3, hit enter, and as I do that, and if I go to my graph, you'll now see a linear one. That doesn't fit that great. You'll see a cubic one. That one fits a little bit better, and then you'll see the last one, a quadratic model, which really doesn't fit any better than that. So the best one that fits would be that cubic model. That's basically what we did today in AP Calc. We just did this in 3 separate problems instead of one large problem. Remember that on Tuesday, September, I believe 24th, during resource, Mr. Bauer is going to have you retake any of those homework quizzes. Thanks.